So get this. The guy who actually created Claude Code just laid out his entire personal workflow. We're talking about a system he designed to build applications at a speed that, honestly, sounds kind of impossible. So let's dive into this masterclass.
And that right there, that's the promise. We're not talking about just a little productivity boost. This is a totally different way of thinking about building things, whether you're a complete beginner or you've been coding for years. The goal here isn't just improvement, it's mastery.
So, how do we actually get there? Well, we're going to break down his entire method into a 5-part blueprint. And just to be clear, this isn't some random list of tips. It's a structured, repeatable system for getting just incredible results. And it's coming straight from the source.
First things first, we have to build the right environment to work in. This is what he calls the command center. It's the physical and virtual setup that becomes the foundation for absolutely everything else we're going to do.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because the very first step is to get out of those traditional code editors like VS Code. This master workflow uses 5, sometimes more, standard terminals all running Claude Code at the same time. This lets you work on different parts of your app all at once, without your computer just grinding to a halt.
And this slide just illustrates the why perfectly. I mean, look at the difference. A heavy-duty IDE like VS Code can just eat up your memory and turn your laptop into a personal space heater. But the terminal approach, it's incredibly lightweight. You can have 5, 10, maybe even 20 instances open, and your machine won't even break a sweat.
But your command center isn't just what's on your computer. The second piece of this is to spin up about 5 to 10 Claude web agents. Think of these as AI assistants out in the cloud just constantly working on your app, 24/7. Here's the pro move. Before you go to bed, you give them a few tasks. When you wake up, you've got fresh code waiting for you to review. Your app is literally being built while you sleep. How cool is that?
All right, let's move on to part 2, getting the AI itself configured for peak performance. I mean, a powerful command center is pretty useless if you don't have a finely tuned engine running inside it. So, here's a crucial point. Don't try to save a few cents by using a smaller, less powerful model. This workflow defaults to Opus 45 for absolutely everything. And why is that? Well, because it's so smart, it's actually more efficient. It gets you the right answer, way faster, and it uses fewer tokens to do it, which saves you a ton of time and frustration down the road. This is your secret weapon for getting consistent results. The claude.md file is basically a set of rules that you create, and it gets sent along with every single prompt you make. Think of it like a permanent instruction manual for your AI, always steering it towards the best practices and helping it avoid common mistakes right from the start. Okay, you're going to want to pay close attention here, because according to the creator himself, this next part is the single most important step in the entire workflow. Seriously, the time you invest here will pay off tenfold later on.
That quote, it pretty much says it all, doesn't it? Plan mode is where you and the AI collaborate to map out the entire solution before a single line of code is even written. Nailing this step is how developers are able to build these huge, complex apps, sometimes in a single shot.
So, the big question is, how do you actually master this incredibly powerful tool? Well, it really comes down to a simple, repeatable process. First, you jump into plan mode, but and this is important, you don't just take the first plan it spits out. You go back and forth with it multiple times, refining it. And here's the real key. You actually prompt Claude to ask you questions. This forces the AI to clear up any confusion and results in a plan that is so much more detailed and way more likely to succeed.
So once you have that rock-solid plan, it's time to hit the accelerator on the actual coding. This is where we get into some techniques that really separate the casual users from the true masters.
Slash commands are one of the most powerful but underutilized features in Claude Code. The best way to think about them is as your own personal shortcuts. You figure out a series of commands you're always typing, and you just bundle them up into one easy-to-remember command. And this right here is a perfect example of their power. Committing your code to Git, it usually takes, 3 or 4 separate commands? Instead, you can just ask Claude to create a custom command, something like /git that does all of that work for you in one single step. Imagine the time that saves over a whole project. It's incredible. And now for the final power move. At the end of a long coding session, you've made a ton of changes and you need a solid quality check. And you know who the best person to do that is? It's the AI itself. You just use this simple prompt. You're asking Claude to review its own work, but you're telling it specifically what to look for: best practices, efficiency, and, this is the most critical one, security. This one simple step can catch so many potential issues and make sure the code you're left with is high quality and secure.
Okay, so let's zoom out and put all these pieces together. This really isn't just a collection of cool tricks. It's a complete blueprint for an entirely new way of building software.
It all comes down to these 5 pillars. You build your multi-terminal command center, you fine-tune the AI with the Opus model and a claude.md file, you master the perfect plan through iteration, you accelerate your work with custom/commands, and then finally, you verify everything with one last prompt. That's the system.
Which really brings us to a final big-picture thought. This kind of workflow fundamentally changes what it means to be a developer. You end up spending way less time just typing out syntax and more time thinking about strategy and architecture. So the real question this leaves us with is, when all the friction of just writing code is removed, what truly ambitious ideas will you bring to life?